Okay guys, hope you are all doing well. So episode number 2. And what I wanted to do this week was give you a little bit more of a background into me, because there's a lot of you guys that might be new to the channel or new to me, new to the email list. And you might be sort of wondering where my background lies, what I'm currently training towards. So I wanted to use this opportunity to dive in to that a little bit, because for me it all started with fat loss, right? So generally when I was growing up, when I was younger, I was a little bit of a chubbier kid. I wasn't massive, but I was a bit of a chubbier kid, something that I was always very, very conscious of. And from probably as early as around 12, 13, I wanted to do something about it. So for me in the early years, first starting out, training was just primarily around fat loss. That was the goal. Try and drop body fat, feel a bit better about myself, feel a bit more confident in myself, feel like I potentially fit in a little bit more. And that went all the way through up until probably late teens, something like that. Until I got to a point where I was like, I'm actually pretty happy now. Like I've managed to drop my body fat. I've managed to bring my physique to a place where I'm pretty happy with. So that was a good sort of 6 to 7 year stint. Now, there were tons of mistakes along the way. I tried pretty much every single thing under the sun that you can imagine during that time. I tried cutting out carbs. I tried completely avoiding fats. I tried not having any sort of snacks, chocolate, fizzy drinks. I barely drank through most of my sort of late teen years. I was not a big drinker. I'm still not a big drinker. It's not really ever been something that's bothered me. I've spent countless hours on the treadmill in 4 or 5 layers of clothing trying to sweat it all out, which we know is completely pointless, right? We know now it makes no sense, and all you're doing is losing water weight that as soon as you have a glass of water afterwards, you then put back on. So it's completely pointless. But the point is, I've literally been there, done it, tried pretty much everything. And it wasn't until I as I got older, as I continued to study. So from an educational background point of view, I went to uni and I did an undergrad in strength and conditioning. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with a couple of professional academies in both football and rugby, and work with their academy teams as a strength and conditioning coach. I was able to go as a performance analyst and work with county teams and work abroad for a very small stint with a touring team. And then I went back and I did my masters in nutrition, and that's where this really sort of started for me. So when I was doing my masters, I was also working in the gym at the time as well, and I decided at that point I'd got my personal training qualifications just through the degrees that I'd done as part and parcel of those degrees. So I thought I might as well start up personal training, working with a few people whilst I was studying for my masters. So that's where this sort of journey began, and from an educational point of view, that's sort of the background that I had through my sort of teens into my early 20s. And at that point, when it came to my training, I was now in a position where I was pretty happy with my body fat. I wasn't overly concerned about it. I was much more confident in myself, and I'd worked hard for a long time. Yes, through a lot of mistakes, but I'd worked hard for a long time to get to that point. So now it was a case of, right, well, what do I want to do from here? And it was quite simply build on what I've already done, build some more muscle tissue, grow my physique as much as I can. And, over the past few years, that's taken various forms in different photo shoots and stuff like that. So I've done, as of now, 3 photo shoots across the last 2 or 3 years. And I find these a really, really nice process to go through, because it pushes you to almost an extreme to get the best physique that you can, but it also puts you in a fantastic position after that photo shoot to then go and build more lean muscle tissue, because generally the leaner that we are, the easier we're going to build muscle tissue, because your body becomes so sensitive. And it still has to be controlled, and you have to know what you're doing with that, but generally it gets a little bit easier. Now, through that time in my sort of teenage years to sort of late teens, this was all off of my own back. So whilst it was always consistent, the methods that I used were completely all over the place. I'd spend 9 weeks doing a powerlifting program, then I'd spend a few months doing some strongman training, then I'd go back to a bro split bodybuilding training. From a nutritional perspective, I was constantly yo-yoing between, once I'd got that initial fat loss goal, I was then wanting to build some muscle tissue, and I would constantly yo-yo between wanting to gain muscle and then wanting to cut back down. And typically what this would end up looking like would be I would start eating more and more food to try and bulk, and this would last for 4 to 8 weeks. And then after a certain amount of time, I'd start to look a bit smoother. I'd got a bit of a belly back. I didn't feel great about myself. So then I decided I was too smooth. I wanted to look leaner, wanted to feel better about myself, and I'd start dieting again. And then I'd start cutting food down, and I'd do this for 4 to 8 weeks until I started to feel small, until I started to feel scrawny. And then I decided I wanted to bulk up and put muscle on. And I probably spent a good 2 to 3 years in this yo-yo position where nothing ever really changed. I was just going from one extreme to another, constantly back and forth, and never really dedicating enough time to just one specific goal and doing it strategically. And that all changed for me when I started working with my first coach. So I worked with my first coach in my early 20s, and it completely changed the game because I, from that point on, finally started to realise what structure looked like, what a long-term goal looked like, how to then start planning and mapping out my own training and nutrition towards this long-term goal. And for me, that was the game changer that then really changed how I approached my training, how I approached my nutrition. And from that point on, I've seen more progress with maintaining a lean body composition and building muscle tissue in the last few years than I ever did in the 6-7 years leading up to that point. And over the years, I've had a few different coaches. So I think as of recording this, I have had 3 coaches, currently working with 4 coaches. I'm currently working with the 4th. So I've been through a few different coaches, and the main reason for that is to try and learn how different coaches work, how to try and experience different methods, experience different ways of doing things, and learn what is the best for me, what the best approach for me is, what the way I most enjoy it is. And to this point now, where I've got to a point where, and I'm very open about this on my socials, where I don't love training. So for me, training in itself is more of a job that needs to be ticked off through the day, right? It's not something that I get up out of bed on a morning and just can't wait to get to the gym. I spend all day working, thinking about getting to the gym. It's very much a case of I'll get that done, make sure I have a good session, and get on with the rest of my day. And don't get me wrong, like there are times where motivation will be higher and I do look forward to the gym and I do have great sessions, and then there will be times where it really is a case of I don't want to go but I know I need to do it, and it's just a case of going and ticking the boxes. So there is always that natural sort of spike and drop off with motivation for training, but for me it's never going to be something that I absolutely live for, but it still gets done, and that's the main thing. So for now, with the coach that I currently have, and my training goals currently are to put on as much muscle as I possibly can. Like I said, I've spent the last couple of years sort of on and off dieting, doing a few different photo shoots, having those experiences, going to those extremes to understand how it feels, how it works, and how I can help the guys that I now work with do the same. And for me now, I'm going to spend in some serious time actually just focusing on building lean muscle tissue. Because one thing I preach to all the guys that I work with and everyone on my socials, and something that you guys will already know, is that it does not happen overnight. Building lean muscle tissue takes a hell of a long time. It's a much, much longer process than dropping your body fat. When you're dieting down, when you're trying to drop your body fat, you can pretty much see changes if you're doing it right on a weekly to bi-weekly basis, right? You see clear changes all the time. It's very motivating. It keeps you pushing forward. When it comes to building lean muscle tissue, it's the complete opposite. You don't see changes every single week. You barely see changes every month. You start to get a little bit smoother. You don't look quite as lean. It's difficult to stay motivated for that, but that is the time where you need to put the work in and be consistent, because that's what's going to bring those changes and the results the next time you diet down. So for me now, that is exactly where I am at, and I'm wanting to work towards doing another photo shoot in probably another 18 months time, when I've had a significant amount of time dedicated to just building some lean muscle tissue. And that's not necessarily going to look like 18 months straight of just eating in a surplus, trying to build muscle tissue. Realistically, how that will be broken down will be into 16 to 20 week blocks of eating in a little bit of a calorie surplus, so eating a little bit more than my maintenance to help build that lean muscle tissue, and then probably doing a 6 to 8 week tidy up where we drop down into a deficit, get a little bit leaner, keep nice and sharp, hold a nice composition, which again is A, going to allow us to see any small changes that we have made, B, going to keep motivation high for training, C, it gives digestion a little bit of a rest from the higher food volume, it helps you feel a little bit more energetic because eating high amounts of food can make you feel really tired and lethargic, and D, it just keeps things interesting and keeps things varied, and it puts us in a better position when we get a little bit leaner to then continue to build lean muscle tissue. So that's how that sort of process is going to be working across the next 18 months until we get to a point where we are happy and we want to drop in to another photo shoot. So that's where I'm currently at with my own training goals, and the way we're going to approach that is for the time being going to be a much more bodybuilding style split, because at the end of the day, the overall goal is to improve my physique. So it makes sense to do the training that matches that the most. Is that my favourite kind of training? It's probably not at the end of the day. If I go through the different kinds of trainings I've done over the years, whether it's powerlifting, weightlifting, strongman training, CrossFit training, there are other ways of training that I would pick over bodybuilding style most days of the week. But for right now, for what I'm wanting to achieve, they wouldn't make sense to do. They would still probably work. Certainly for most of us, they would still work, but they wouldn't necessarily be as effective in achieving the outcome that I'm wanting to do. So that's not the one that we're going to go with. So that is me. That is where I am currently at. That is the progress that I am currently looking to make and where my training goals currently sit. So over the next 18 months, it's going to be a case of gradually building a bit of muscle tissue, gradually trying to get stronger. And that in itself is going to be the focus of the workouts. It isn't a case of focusing every week on, okay, can we notice any changes? Can we notice any differences? Are my shoulders slightly bigger? Are my legs slightly bigger? Because you're not going to notice that. It's going to be more tangible feedback where it'll be, okay, have I got stronger week to week? Because you can bet if you go through a process where you focus on getting stronger every single week, and you do get stronger near enough every single week, and that doesn't necessarily mean more weight every week, but it could be an extra rep every week, it could be more control on your movements every single week, but some form of progression every week, where outside of that your nutrition is controlled and structured, you're eating enough to recover, and then you are recovering well and you're not crippled with DOMS all week. If you nail those three things over time, you can guarantee that you're going to build consistent lean muscle tissue. It's going to happen. There's no way you're not getting stronger, recovering well and eating well and not building muscle to go with that. So those are the three things that we're going to be focusing on, or I'm going to be focusing on for the majority of the next 18 months, interspersed with little diet cuts here and there. And I'm going to be keeping you updated with all of that as we go through it. It's going to be a long process, very long-term goal, but it is one that I am massively looking forward to. And if you've got any questions on this along the way, look, drop me a message, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer anything, because chances are, watching this, you're not an elite bodybuilder. In fact, I would be willing to say there are going to be no elite bodybuilders watching this that train 5, 6, 7 times a week. The reality is you're probably someone who wants to get in a little bit better shape, enjoys going to the gym a little bit, but it isn't your reason for being. And you've got 3 to 5 hours a week that you can probably put towards a gym or a little bit of cardio or whatever it is. And you're just wanting some useful tips and advice on the best way to go about doing that to help you get the result. So if that is you, and if you're listening to that and you're nodding head thinking, yep, that's where I'm at, then feel free to reach out, drop me a message, drop a comment on the video below, asking any questions that you need, or you can find me on Instagram, drop me any messages on Instagram, that's just at JakeMees_coaching. Guys, thank you for listening to the video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.